election of Keir Starmer to the Labour leadership. I'm Sarah Sachs-Eldridge. I'm the Socialist Party National Organiser, and in a few minutes I'm going to be joined by Hannah Sell, who's the Socialist Party General Secretary. I'm going to be asking her questions, some of the questions that have come up on social media over the last week as people have been discussing this. Some have been sent to us and so on. So we're hoping to start the discussion proper in a minute, but as I've been saying, if you could just tag people in the comments below, tell us who's watching, say hello, interact in the comments below as well as watching, and share and share and share. Share the link, try and get more people involved. We just want to try and build up the audience a bit. Okay, and I've got the go-ahead that we can start. So I'm going to be joined by Hannah Sell, Socialist Party General Secretary, to discuss the election of Keir Starmer to the Labour leadership. Hello, Hannah.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you today?
Fine, bit warm.
Yeah, okay. Right, well, I'm going to just move on straight away. So, Hannah, we've got the new issue of the Socialist come out after the election, and people who've had it already in the post will see that there's a page in this week's Socialist of comments from people who have applied to join the Socialist Party, and they're saying things like, I wish to join a true Socialist Party. Labour with Starmer is, I feel, going to become centrist and renounce socialist values. It's from people who've mostly been Labour members and have left. So is the Socialist Party celebrating this result, Keir Starmer as the new Labour leader?
No, that's a very short answer, but I mean, obviously, we're always happy when people apply to join the Socialist Party. It's great we've had so many people applying in the last week, and we hope that some of the people watching this broadcast today will also decide they'd like to join the Socialist Party. But we are absolutely not celebrating the election of Keir Starmer as the leader of the Labour Party. It is a defeat for the left wing. It is a defeat for the workers' movement. And in our view, it was an avoidable defeat, and we are not celebrating it. When Jeremy Corbyn was first elected back in 2015, then we did celebrate that. We were very happy because that represented an opportunity to build a mass party with a socialist programme in Britain. I don't mean by that we thought Jeremy Corbyn being elected made Labour into a mass party with a socialist programme. Unfortunately, that was absolutely not the case. The shorthand we've used throughout the last 5 years is to talk about Labour being two parties in one. Because on the one hand, you had the pro-capitalist machine, the MPs, the majority of the councillors, the majority of the structures of the Labour Party that remained capitalist and extremely hostile to Jeremy Corbyn. And then on the other hand, the hundreds of thousands of people who were enthused by Jeremy Corbyn's victory, who flooded into the Labour Party, they represented the possibility of developing a mass workers' party. And we welcome that. And at every stage, we've put forward what we think is necessary for that potential workers' party to succeed and to come into being. So we've raised the need for mandatory reselection of MPs, so that local Labour parties could democratically decide who represented them in elections. We've raised the need for councils to stop implementing Tory cuts and to stand up for their local populations. We've raised the democratisation of the Labour Party, the restoring of trade union rights within the Labour Party, and the Labour Party returning to the kind of federal organisation that brought together different workers' organisations in a democratic way, which was the case at the birth of the Labour Party. And we've not just put forward those demands, we've fought for them. So, for example, in the trade unions, then we fought for that programme, and a number of affiliated unions, Unite, for example, adopting the policy of mandatory reselection was as a result of a Socialist Party member moving that motion through their branch and then at the Unite conference and succeeding in winning that point of view. And we've also put forward that we should have been allowed to affiliate to the Labour Party in the same way as the Cooperative Party did, for example, in order to be able to aid that fight from within the Labour Party, as well as putting forward the case outside. Unfortunately, the fighting programme that we put forward, which we think could have succeeded, was not adopted by the leaders of the left in the Labour Party. On the contrary, the general policy has been one of attempting to compromise with the right wing, the pro-capitalist wing of the Labour Party, making concessions with that to them in a vain attempt to keep them happy. And of course, it's never made them happy, because only the complete defeat of Corbynism would actually make them happy. And that has resulted in a serious defeat for Corbynism that has just taken place. And we're absolutely not happy about it.
Okay, thanks very much, Hannah. I mean, one of the things that has been discussed a lot on social media, and since the general election, since the the defeat of Corbyn in the 2019 general election, wasn't it a lack of his ability to unite the party? And obviously Keir Starmer did stand as a unifying leader. Isn't that something that the Labour could get Labour elected and then allow things to develop? But isn't that what Jeremy Corbyn was lacking? The ability to just, wasn't he lacking in strength to bring the party together?
Yes, well, I don't think so. The first thing I would say is it's very frustrating to have watched the Labour leadership contest and to have almost every debate on the TV start with the commentator who's hosting the debate saying, but isn't it true that divided parties can never win elections? And nobody ever says, hang on a minute, a divided party did just win an election. The Tory party was split down the middle and they won the election. So it's not as simple as that. Of course, we do understand the urge to unity, because the workers' movement has strength when it's united. At a very basic level, when you go out on strike, if everybody goes out on strike together, you're much stronger than if a large minority of people don't take part in that strike and cross the picket lines. So we understand the urge to unity. And while we think it's very important to have democratic discussion and debate within the workers' movement on the way forward, we also recognise that once you've taken a decision, you need to act together sometimes in order to be effective. But there's a basic prerequisite to that, and that is that you're all on the same side. I'm kind of nervous about using football analogies, because people who know me will know I know very little indeed about football. But I think it's like when you're playing football, you are in a team and you work together as a team. You can see this is basic stuff here. But you don't work together with the opposing team, the people on the other side. And that's the point here, isn't it? There were class enemies in the Labour Party. There are class enemies in the Labour Party. People who are not on the side of the working class majority, but are on the side of the capitalist class and the elite, the 0.1% in this country. And it doesn't help to try and get unity with them, because they're fighting for completely different class interests than the hundreds of thousands of people who joined the Labour Party in order to support Jeremy Corbyn. Under Tony Blair, Labour became a pro-capitalist party. Maggie Thatcher said that Tony Blair was her greatest achievement. And she was right, because it meant that big business in this country had two parties that they could rely on to govern in their interests, that would privatise. I mean, more privatisation of the NHS took place in the new Labour era than did under any Tory government. That would go to war when that was in the interests of British capitalism, as they did in Iraq and Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. By the way, part of that process of making Labour a safe party for capitalism was the expulsion of what is now the Socialist Party, then the militant tendency. And what were we expelled for? In the main, the expulsions took place during the mass battle against the poll tax. What was that? It's 30 years ago, so you can read about it at the moment in articles in the Socialist and on our website. That was a tax that was introduced where every single person in the country had to pay exactly the same amount of money. Whether you were a billionaire or a refuse worker, whether you were unemployed or working in the City of London on the stock markets, you paid exactly the same. We led an 18 million strong campaign of non-payment against that tax, which succeeded in chucking Thatcher out of office. And that's what we were expelled from the Labour Party for, while Labour councils were jailing people who had not paid that iniquitous poll tax. We were expelled, if you like, into the class struggle. But that process, which also, by the way, involved shutting down the mass youth section of the Labour Party, which we led. I was the last representative from the Labour Party Young Socialists on the executive of the Labour Party, and we had thousands of young people coming together in conferences in order to discuss and debate socialist ideas led by a Marxist organisation. The right wing, the pro-capitalist wing of the Labour Party could never defeat us, so in the end they shut the youth section of the Labour Party down. But that process led to a fundamental change in the Labour Party, where it had always had a pro-capitalist leadership, but previously its mass democratic structures had allowed the working class to exert pressure on that leadership. So, for example, you would never have been able to have in the past, however bad various Labour governments were, Labour governments going to war in Iraq at the same time as millions of people were demonstrating on the streets against that because of the pressure that was exerted from below. But in that period, the Labour Party became a capitalist party. That doesn't mean there were no socialist remnants left. Obviously there were. There were still a few principled MPs who were at the time a bit like prisoners, smuggling out messages through the bars, people like Jeremy Corbyn, who continued to vote against privatisation, against war, against austerity throughout the New Labour years. And also the trade unions had had their power within the Labour Party curtailed massively, but there was still union affiliation. So those remnants still existed. And when Jeremy Corbyn was elected, by a fluke in reality, because they allowed non-Labour Party members to vote for £3, that he was pushed into power in the leadership of the Labour Party. But that represented an opportunity to reclaim the Labour Party, to create a mass party of the working class, to go back, if you like, to what those first workers who fought to found the Labour Party wanted, which was a party that represented their independent interests. Now, it was never going to be the case that the capitalist class would say, oh, marvellous, we're losing control of the Labour Party. Let's not complain about that. It's democracy in action. I mean, of course they weren't going to. They were bound to set out to do everything they could to undermine Jeremy Corbyn, to have MPs who represented their interests try and lead a coup against him. And at the same time, and that of course was unsuccessful back in 2016, but at the same time, to vilify him in the capitalist press. And that, by the way, was a badge of honour. When newspapers owned by billionaires are saying nice things about you, as somebody who describes themselves as a socialist, you know you're doing something wrong. The fact they were desperate to try and tell lies about him, to undermine him, to vilify him, was a reflection of the fact that they were threatened by the movement coming into existence around Jeremy Corbyn, or the potential for that movement. Does that mean that he couldn't have won a general election because they were attacking him, because the right wing of his own party were attacking him? We say absolutely not. And we would say, look back at the 2017 snap election. We know that May ran a useless campaign, but that's not the central thing here. Labour put on 3.5 million votes, more than any party in a general election since the 1945 election, and no one expected Labour to win that either, by the way, but there was a mass upsurge then, and Churchill was thrown out of power and Labour was elected. And he was able to do that because of the popularity of his programme that cut through the lies that were being told about him. Of course, that wasn't repeated in 2019, and Labour went down to defeat. But in our view, it wasn't the slander in the press against him that was inevitable. And by the way, it was inevitable, it was stepped up because the big business realised he might win a general election, which they weren't so sure about back in 2017. But it was the failure to answer it and the constant concessions to the right wing of the party. That's what muffled Labour's message. All the opinion polls show that the policies that were put forward were generally very popular, as far as people knew about them. But the message was completely muffled because of the concessions that had been made to the right, which meant, for example, that Labour councils up and down the country were not doing what we did when we led Liverpool City Council along with others, and we led a mass movement to say we're not implementing Tory cuts, we're going to stand in the interest of the people of Liverpool who've elected us and fight for a needs budget to meet the city's needs. But instead of that, Labour councils up and down the country were saying, oh, but we've got no choice to implement austerity because the government's telling us to implement austerity. And that does undermine workers believing you're really an anti-austerity party, where when you're in power, in local authorities, but also in government, in Wales, then you're implementing that austerity. And then there was also the critical question of Brexit. Let us not forget, Starmer drove the change in the position on Brexit. In 2017, Labour said it would honour the referendum. In 2019, it put forward an extremely confused position in which Corbyn himself took no position at all, and which meant that workers thought that Labour was not going to respect the outcome of the referendum. And so they didn't win the election in 2019. It's also another frustration about the leadership election we've just had was that Rebecca Long-Bailey, who was dubbed the Corbynite candidate, didn't defend the general election campaign, allowed the narrative that's been told, where again, after they'd finished saying divided parties can't win elections, the commentators all said, and that's proven because you had the worst result since 1935. And all three of them sit there going, oh yes, we have the worst results. Let's just slash our wrists now. I mean, look, let's be clear, it wasn't a good election result. But Labour's election result was higher in percentage terms than 2010 or 2015. And I think you've got to go back to 2001, I'd have to check that, to have a higher vote in terms of the absolute vote in that election. And yet there was nothing said to point that out, to point out that this was more successful than the pro-capitalist programmes that had been put in recent general elections. She said nothing on the council cuts. She signed up to the pledge of the Jewish Board of Deputies, who represent a tiny minority of the Jewish population in Britain. And, you know, a big hook that the capitalist press have used to attack the left in the Labour Party are claims of anti-Semitism. We are completely opposed to anti-Semitism, but a huge element of what has taken place here is not dealing with genuine cases of anti-Semitism, but false allegations of anti-Semitism in order to whip up attacks on the left of the Labour Party. And by signing up to that pledge, she signed up actually to a witch hunter's charter which prepares the ground now that Starmer's won for further attacks on the left in the Labour Party. So we don't think any of this was preordained, but what was necessary was to come out fighting instead of the constant retreats that have taken place.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. And you've talked a bit there about Tony Blair, about what he did to the Labour Party, but also about the attacks that he made on the working class. But Starmer isn't Blair. We're not back there again. And a lot of people have been saying, look, he's to the right of Corbyn, but he's not a right-winger. Look at his programme. He signed up for common ownership of rail, mail, energy and water. Isn't the Socialist Party going too far, exaggerating this in calling this a serious defeat for the left?
Sadly, no, I don't think we are exaggerating. Of course, it's true that an open Blairite couldn't have won this leadership election. And even Jess Phillips claims she's not a Blairite, but I think most of us think she's a Blairite. She had to pull out of the contest. Starmer was only able to win because he said he was the unity candidate. He didn't openly attack Corbyn's record, and as you say, in his programme are still a number of good demands. But you know, look, by your friends shall you be known. And I think it's pretty clear from the reaction of the capitalist class and the right of the Labour Party that they know that Starmer was their candidate. He was backed by Progress and Labour First, and they are the Blairite organisations within the Labour Party. George Osborne, the Chancellor who presided over the worst austerity since the 1930s in this country, twice said in the Evening Standard that Starmer was the best candidate and he hoped that Starmer won, and so on. And look what he's done since he's been elected. Look at the shadow cabinet. It's not just that he didn't invite Corbyn to take a seat in the shadow cabinet, but that the most consistent supporters of Corbyn, people like Ian Lavery, John Trickett, have been ditched. And at the same time, Ed Miliband's in the shadow cabinet. Rachel Reeves is in the shadow cabinet. This is the woman who said she was going to be tougher on benefits claimants than the Tories when she was last in the shadow cabinet, after what they've done, after the hundreds of thousands of people who have suffered, the people who've died as a result of hunger because of the benefit claimants, of benefit laws introduced by the Tory governments, and she wanted to pose that Labour was going to be even tougher, and now she's back in the shadow cabinet. This is about making Labour safe for capitalism again, ready to take the reins if necessary. I thought the Financial Times editorial on Starmer's victory was very interesting, because that is a paper where the capitalists talk to each other. And their advice to Starmer was, don't join a national government yet. Now, the first thing about that is it's completely wrong, and an indication of his point of view, what class interests he represents, that Starmer has said he would be willing to join a national government. Because let's be clear, you know, we're in a time of crisis at the moment. We all know that, and defeating the we're not talking about the coronavirus today, but defeating the coronavirus, defending people's health is the most important issue in everybody's minds. But workers and capitalists still don't have the same interests in that struggle. Ultimately, Johnson is interested, and his government is interested in protecting the profits of the capitalists and protecting their system, whereas the workers' movement is about defending the health, the safety, the lives and the livelihood of working class people, about decent health and safety, testing, PPE, and we need independent representatives to fight for that, not members of a capitalist government. But that's all a bit off the point, because the original point I was going to make is they say, don't join a national government yet, but what interested me was their reason. Because the reason that the Financial Times give for it is basically because Starmer needs to keep his hands clean in case the Tories collapse after so badly mishandling, after their failure to drive for testing early enough and so on, mishandling the corona crisis. They could be forced out of power, and the Financial Times want a safe second 11, to use another sport I don't know much about as an analogy, and for them, Starmer represents that, and that says everything about his real character, even though he has to dress it up a bit at this point in time in order to win the votes of Labour Party members.
Okay, so you've talked there about how the capitalist class is planning its way forward, what it's going to do, how it can, you know, get the best out of the situation. What should socialists do now, Hannah?
Look, there's never been a greater need for socialist ideas than there is now. I don't think that's an exaggeration. The need for socialism is more obvious than ever. After all, Johnson and the rest of them were saying Corbyn's a mad Marxist, he's a threat to our system because he puts forward this Marxist nationalisation. And now, as a result of the health and economic crisis that's developing, they've been forced to intervene in the economy, to carry out state intervention, in some senses on a bigger scale than Jeremy Corbyn ever put forward. They've virtually nationalised wages. They've had to step in and nationalise the railways. Of course, they're not doing that under democratic working class control as we would put forward, nor are they doing it in our interests. they're doing it in order to save their own system. But it still points to the fact that capitalism doesn't work. When there's a crisis, they have to take measures of state intervention to try and rescue their own system. They cannot rely on the free market, which they normally claim is so absolutely wonderful. And at the same time, the crisis that's developing and the economic crisis that will flow out of the corona crisis means that working class people are faced with real worries, including worries about mass unemployment, wage cuts, because don't doubt big business are going to try and make us pay for this crisis, just like they tried to make us pay for the banking crisis back in 2008. So we need our own independent voice. And I think there are millions of working class people who understand that. After all, union membership is spiking, is going up across the different sectors of the economy at the moment as people look to trade unions to represent them industrially. But in our view, we don't only need industrial representation, vital as that is, and it's absolutely right people are joining trade unions, but we need a political representation as well. When it comes to elections, we don't want workers who've joined the trade union movement to fight for decent pay and conditions in their local council elections having a choice between politicians who all favour austerity and cuts in their local authorities. We don't want the same on at national level, that you've got a choice, as we did for years under Blair, between 3 different or 4 different pro-capitalist candidates in the elections. So therefore, the need for a mass political voice for the working class, a mass workers' party with a socialist programme, is greater now even than it was during the Corbyn years. How are we going to achieve that? Of course, we want people to join the Socialist Party, and we'd appeal to you today, join the Socialist Party, because we want people to draw the conclusions that we have, that the only way that we're going to be able to build a society that really meets the needs of us all, that gives us free education, that gives us decent jobs, the right to retire while we've still got some decades to enjoy life, decent housing, saves the planet. The only way we're going to achieve all of those things on a permanent and long-lasting basis is not just to tinker at the edges, but is to nationalise the major corporations and banks, about 120 or so of them in Britain probably, and to bring them into democratic public ownership in order to begin to build a socialist plan of production, so to break with capitalism and have a socialist transformation of society. So we want people to agree with that and therefore to join the Socialist Party. But we also recognise that there are millions of people who want the working class to have its own voice, who want to stand up to big business, but haven't yet drawn all of those conclusions. And that's why we've always put forward the idea of a mass workers' party, in which we can discuss and debate how we get to socialism and what socialism is, but we all fight together for the same basic class interests. Now, in the last few years, the most viable way of achieving that has seemed to be around the movement coming into existence, or potentially coming into existence, around Corbyn. But let's be clear, Starmer's election represents a defeat. And therefore, there's now a question, how are we going to get a mass workers' party in Britain? Clearly, there are still many people who are members of the Labour Party who haven't ripped up their membership cards in disgust and are going to be continuing to try and fight in the Labour Party. What we would say to them is draw the conclusions from the last 5 years. It does not work to compromise with the right wing. It does not work to compromise with the pro-capitalist elements. Start saying we will only back local authority candidates who are actually prepared to stand up for our local communities and oppose the cuts. Start fighting seriously to transform Labour into a party of the working class. But we also have to say, Starmer's won at this stage with quite a big majority, and he has a relatively easy job in consolidating his victory at this point in time, because the job hasn't been done in the last 5 years. So it's not the same for him as it was for Corbyn. Corbyn faced a hostile parliamentary Labour Party, a hostile Labour Party machine, councillors who were opposing him, Starmer doesn't face any of that because the big majority of the Labour Party remains the pro-capitalist party in terms of the structures. I don't mean all the members, but the structures that existed before Corbyn won, because what was done, what was necessary, wasn't done in the last 5 years. And therefore there is a broader question here, which the workers' movement as a whole needs to urgently start to discuss. Because in our view, it would be criminal in a situation where we're going to be facing mass unemployment and mass misery as a result of the economic crisis, for anybody in the workers' movement, whether or not they're members of the Labour Party, to say, we've got no choice but to campaign for Labour candidates, even when those Labour candidates are capitalist, because that's the only alternative. That would be the same as what was done back at the dawn of the Labour Party, when other workers had to stand up and say, we're not voting for the Liberals anymore. They're a party of big business. We're not prepared to have candidates who represent us, who stand up for big business and the super rich. We're going to start to build our own party, a new mass workers' party. And that issue is posed again now because of the way that, unfortunately, the potential that has existed around Corbyn has been defeated at this point in time. And we would say we'll be putting forward those ideas in the Socialist Party, but we'd say to the whole of the workers' movement, it's urgent we start discussing this now. We cannot just accept the status quo. It would be a huge mistake to think we've just got to be loyal to Starmer, a man who is there with the intention of being loyal to big business, in this time of social tumult. Instead, we've got to fight to make sure that the working class has political representatives that really stand in our interests.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Hannah. I think that was really clear, and I hope people have been listening and got something out of what we've been saying here today. Hannah made an appeal to people, if you agree with what we're saying here today, to join us. I will repeat that, because our branches, the groups of members in areas all over the country, are going to be having meetings probably in the next week discussing this very issue, and we want you to participate in those discussions. We want you to join us, but you're very welcome, if you're interested in joining the Socialist Party, to attend your local online meeting. Get in touch with us at join@socialistparty.org.uk and we can put you in touch with your local branch. But also, they will want to discuss with you. They will want to find out what your questions are. They will want to find out what you're interested in, what makes you a socialist. And through that discussion, if we can establish a common basis of political agreement, they will explain to you what being a member is, because we want you to help us to build the voice for socialism, to build the voice for the ideas that Hannah has been putting forward here today. But also, Hannah made the point that there's never been a greater need for socialist ideas. So I will appeal to you, if you are not already subscribing to the Socialist paper, that you take out a subscription to that today. You can do that via our website, socialistparty.org.uk. You can also there take out a subscription to Socialism Today, our monthly magazine. And I would also say, if you're at home and you've got time and you want to read more about what's going on in the world, the socialist analysis that we are putting forward, go to the website socialistworld.net, because that's the website of the Committee for a Workers' International. The CWI is the World Socialist Organisation that the Socialist Party is affiliated to, and there you will read fantastic material, both from across the world, but also general articles drawing out what's happening at the moment and the tasks for the struggle for socialism. And finally, my final appeal before I shut up and let you get on with sharing this video and the rest of your day, is that if you agree with what you heard today, or you just want to hear more of it, that you make a donation to the Socialist Party. We need support from people who agree with us, who want us to be able to continue putting out a socialist viewpoint in this corona crisis situation. Every day we get the briefing from not Johnson at the moment, but from the Tories. We want to make sure that there are socialist ideas out there as well that put the case for working class struggle, that report on the working class struggles already taking place, that draw the lessons on how workers can organise in their workplaces and communities to defend working class interests, safety and rights and so on. So if you want to hear more, videos like this, hear our podcasts, see us produce our material, etc., etc., please make a donation today, and you can do that as well via our Socialist Party website, socialistparty.org.uk. Okay, I'll shut up now. Get in touch as well if you want to give us ideas of what you think we should discuss at next week's Friday Facebook Live. Otherwise, we'll be making up some ideas ourselves. But get in touch with what you think about what we had to say today. Join the Socialist Party, read The Socialist, donate to the Socialist Party. See you next Friday.